أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Again, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. Hope you're doing well, inshallah. So we have a lot to do, so I'm going to just get started. Actually, before we get started, so today is the last Tanzeel before Ramadan. So there's not going to be another Saturday night Tanzeel until we start Ramadan. In Ramadan, the schedule is going to change. I'll talk about it a little bit more later, but just preemptively in case you're listening now and not later. Tanzeel during Ramadan is still happening, number one. Number two, it's going to be on Sunday after the Hood, so Sunday around like 1:30 instead of Saturday night for obvious reasons. And the third thing is it's going to be weekly. Now, what we're going to do, I'm going to tell you at the end of today, okay? But that's just to let you know right now. And if you're not part of the WhatsApp group, make sure you're on it so you get like the schedule and everything ahead of time and some announcements and stuff. Okay. So today what do we title today? Thank you. Yeah, I should have came up with a lecture or something. So today we're talking about Ramadan a little bit, but so we talked about who was here for the Ramadan talk last year, because we do this basically every year, the Tanzeel before. So 2 of you. Wow, great. Okay, mashallah. So I miscalculated. So last year what we did was we actually we talked about the ayah about Ramadan, obviously, and kind of like through Allah's own words, what is Ramadan about? What's the purpose of it? What does He say about it? What does Allah focus on when He talks about it? Interestingly enough, well, the 2 of you who are here, how many times is the word Ramadan mentioned in the book? Yeah, only 1 time. So if you were to scan through the entire 600 whatever pages of the Quran, you'll only find the word Ramadan mentioned 1 time. You'll find the word Siyam or Saum mentioned multiple times, fasting, but Ramadan, the month, the title of that month is only mentioned only 1 time. So it's like, you don't have to, do a lot of studying to find out what does Allah intend through Ramadan, is kind of the cool thing about that. You just have to go to this one little short passage in Baqarah, it's a couple of ayahs, and you will know through Allah's words what is the purpose of Ramadan. So it's very, very simple. We did this last year. I'm not going to do it all over again. I'm going to review this and then do something else that I think is also really important, okay? If you want that in more detail, that specific ayah, you can just find Tanzeel on YouTube, Ramadan 2024, and you can go through that again. I'm going to do a quick refresh, a quick review of that ayah to set the stage, then we'll take a break, and then I'm going to do something else afterwards, okay? Make sense? Okay, bismillah. So when Allah talks about Ramadan, it's in Baqarah somewhere, I forgot the ayah, but He opens up saying, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. The month, well, before I translate it actually, the interesting thing about Muslims, wallah, is that we sometimes, because of culture or because we forget or for whatever the reason, because our parents taught us different, for whatever the reason, we end up redefining things outside of how Allah defines things. So for example, Allah has a certain idea what marriage looks like, but then because of culture, the way you're raised, problems you have, whatever the case may be, you end up redefining marriage in sometimes ways that's unhealthy. Or happiness. Or how to spend your time. And sometimes even we can get messed up enough, mashallah alayna, we can get messed up enough that we can even redefine religious stuff like Ramadan or Salah or things that are literally just for Allah. We end up sort of redefining what it means outside of how Allah defines it. Does that make sense what I'm saying so far? So when I say the word Ramadan is obviously coming up, may Allah keep us alive for it. I've known, by the way, 2 individuals that I've known growing up died in the last 2 weeks. So when I say may Allah help us reach Ramadan, really say may Allah help us reach Ramadan, because we're not guaranteed it. May Allah help us see to the end of it and accept it from us. So when I say that word Ramadan, maybe some things pop in your head. Maybe you think about tarawih, like standing and your feet hurt because you hear that word as some sort of Pavlovian dog response. Yeah, they salivate with meat, but your feet hurt when you hear the word Ramadan. Okay, maybe. Maybe you think about iftar. Obviously, what's one thing everyone thinks about is what? Fasting. Some people think about, you beat me to the punch. I was going to say samosas, but yeah, qata'if too. Maybe you think of iftar, like the food itself. You think of a bunch of different things that Ramadan is quote unquote all about. Some things that happen in the month. You might think about you roll your eyes to the back of your head thinking about the annoying conversation you have with coworkers every year. Not even water, like those conversations. You think about these things. None of those things is actually how Allah introduces Ramadan though. The one thing he mentions, you see, I told you he mentions Ramadan, there's a passage about Ramadan, a couple of ayahs. Later on, not right away, not in the beginning, when he introduces what the month is all about, he says one thing that wasn't on my list of things that pop up in our head. Later on down the list of ayat, he'll mention whoever witnesses it, then it's written on you that you fast for that month. But when he opened up talking about what Ramadan's all about, he says, and I'll repeat it from the beginning, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. The month of Ramadan is the month where Quran was sent down. So all of these things that you and I have in our head, this is about preparing for Ramadan supposedly, right? The first thing is to kind of redefine what is it all about in Allah's terms. And on Allah's terms, Ramadan is primarily, first and foremost, about what? Quran. Everything else is, even fasting is secondary, which is crazy in our minds, in our kind of rendition of what Ramadan's all about. Even fasting is secondary. The primary thing about it is what? Quran itself. This is the month where you're supposed to put everything to the side and focus on Quran. Okay? Now, obviously, later on, what does Allah say? فَمَنْ شَهِدَ, he talks about Quran a little bit, and then a little bit down in that passage, he says, فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمَ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْهُ. Then whoever amongst you were to witness that month, then they should fast it. They should fast in that month. Now again, I want this to be a little bit of a review. So this is what's supposed to happen to us in this month. We had a lot of passages that we talked about in Tanzeel for the past year and a half plus at this point, where Allah compares the Quran to two different things, water and light. But I want to focus on this light part, okay? You have two aspects that we talked about a while ago at Tanzeel, but I'll repeat myself. Two aspects of who you are. You have the ruh, that's deep within your heart, and everything else you can say is your body. The ruh, your soul, that makes you you, that gives you the personality potentially even that you have, that makes you who you are, that thing, that creature that Allah put inside you, that is made of light. And the body is made of dirt. Now, to nurture the body, which is made of dirt, you also need things that are of the earth. So you need things that come from dirt. So you need water, you need food, which comes from the earth, water, which you find on the earth, entertainment that's found on the earth, a spouse who also, because they're made of dirt, is found on the earth. You hunt animals that are on the earth, so on and so forth. You get the idea. To nourish the thing made of dirt, you have to eat things that come from dirt. Does that make sense so far? Okay, what about the ruh? The ruh is made of light. So you can't feed the ruh through Cheez-Its and soda. How do you feed the ruh? You can't feed it things from the earth. You feed it things made of what? Light. Because the ruh is made of light, you feed it things made of light. And what is the only thing Allah says that we have on this world that is light? It's Quran. So here's the idea. Throughout the entire last year, and this is a review for a lot of you, and that's okay. For the entirety of last year, since last Ramadan, we have been stuffing ourselves, gorging ourselves, not just with food and water or all kinds of drink, but entertainment, video games, movies, stories, junk food, books, YouTube, TikTok, just brain rot through and through. All things of the earth is what we've been consuming in mass since last year. We've been fattening and stuffing this body. Meanwhile, what's slowly starving and dying is the ruh. And this is the one month where Allah says, in this particular month, you are going to starve a little bit the body, and you're going to fatten up what? The ruh. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. This is the month of soul food. This is the month of Quran. That's what you're supposed to be focusing on. If I can give an example, it's kind of like, so in my house, we have a house plant. And I don't know if you've raised plants before, but some people have this weird idea that like if a house plant dies or like a garden dies, that's it, khalas, so throw away the plant, it's dead. When in reality, that's not the case. All you have to do is put it back in sunlight, start watering it again, and even though it looks all dried up or it looks shriveled up, you know how they kind of go like droopy? If you start watering them again, yaqum, it'll stand up upright again, all over again, as if you just planted the thing and just bought it from Home Depot or whatever you bought it from. This is like, Allah actually literally compares us to plants in the book a lot, by the way. So it's no mistake that Quran is both water and light, and plants need what to live? Water and light. He's comparing our relationship with this book like a plant's relationship with water and sunlight, the thing that it needs to survive. So this whole month you've been, whether you know it or not, maybe you feel it. I feel it a lot, wallah. Throughout the year, if I know the difference, like Shadi with Quran, Shadi without Quran, I'll feel that difference. And Ramadan is my opportunity to yaqum. I'll stand upright again. Even if it's been months or years that I didn't have a relationship with the book, if I water myself, if I let this light in my heart again, into my ruh again, yaqum, I'll stand upright. And I'll literally, not just I'll stand upright, I'll be brought back to life, like I was dead. Just like the trees outside right now are in some sort of death or hibernation. But when spring comes and rain comes and sunlight comes, they come back to life again. This is the seasons of our soul right now, as we've been through a winter and Ramadan is finally the spring. Does that make sense what we're going into, inshallah? That is a summary of how Allah introduces Ramadan and what that means to us. So obviously it's a lot of Quran focus. What I want to talk about today, inshallah, I'm going to let you go in like a minute or two for a break, and then we're going to come back and reset a little bit. What I want to talk about today, because again, I talked about that verse last year. If you want to learn more about that and in more detail, you can just YouTube it if you want to from last year. What I want to talk about this year, inshallah, is, okay, fine, it's the month of Quran. What is the big deal about the Quran? When you think about like who it was revealed to primarily, this book, it was revealed to backward Bedouin Arab people that had no civilization. Like they're I don't even know, like I thought some people to compare them to nowadays. They were nobodies. They were nothing. You had these two big empires, like you can say the America or China or Russia of the time, which was like the Byzantine Empire, the Sassanid Empire, the Persian Empire, whatever. You had these two, fighting and killing each other for supremacy, and no one even thought about who? The Arabs. What's the big deal about them? I'm not sure who was there last year when we talked about the miracles of Quran. We had like 4 full sessions about this. Raise your hand. Okay, so very few. Jeez, we got to do a review of that. But okay. One thing that, if I recall correctly, what I said was the most impressive thing about the Quran, the most impactful thing, the most miraculous thing about the book is not the linguistic miracles, it's not the mathematical miracles, or what we call the scientific, or the micro analysis of surahs, or the micro or word choice. We talked about all that stuff back then, but the most impressive thing about Quran that no one can deny is how it changed people's lives. That is extremely clear. Whether you believe in the book or don't believe in the book, the way it transformed those people that were basically nothing. For example, Michael Hart, a lot of people know him. He's a non-Muslim, but he wrote a book that was like, top 100 people who ever lived. And then number 1 on his list was the Prophet ﷺ, Muhammad ﷺ. And he's a Christian, but he put Jesus number 12 or something. And he put Muhammad ﷺ number 1 actually, because he's like, I can't deny that he has done more to the world than anyone else ever could say they have. On his list, I believe number 13 is Umar ibn Khattab, which was one of the companions or disciples of the Prophet ﷺ. Scholars say about him, without Quran, without Islam, he would have just died probably from liver disease, because all he was a mean drunk. That's all he was. He would have died, radiyallahu anhu, Umar Khattab, no one knowing his name. Who in the world in 2025 would care at all about whoever who cares? He was just some drunkard that harassed people when he was drunk. That's all he was. He was tough and no one messed with him, but that's all he was. It was Quran that came and changed these men and women to the point where they were just a different society. That they were raised to then take over both empires that didn't give any care about them just 23 years prior, subhanAllah. This is what Quran does. What I want to talk about today is, how does Allah define that process of change? How does Quran actually change us, and how does Allah define that process of change? Does that make sense? Not just change on the societal level, like a community, but as an individual. What will Quran do for you? There's actually this 4-step process I want to talk about today. That's what I want to do. That way, during Ramadan, this can be like a litmus test of, do I have enough Quran in my life? Am I anywhere on this process of change? Does that make sense? Okay. What I'm going to do is give you guys 5 minutes of a break. So there's coffee in the back. I hope there's enough coffee in the back, but there is some coffee in the back and water and stuff. So go relax a little bit. I'll give you guys until let's say 8:50, and then we'll come back inshallah afterwards, okay? And we'll get started. All right, we'll see you guys soon. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Okay, for the 3 of you that like to follow along, we're going to be looking at Surah Al-Jumu'ah, the first 2 ayahs today. That's all we're going to be doing. Okay? This is surah number, what would this be? That's 62. Surah number 62. Okay? So Surah Al-Jumu'ah opens up, and here's what we're going to hear, by the way, okay? So there's 2 ayahs that we're going to talk about. The first ayah, you're going to hear 4 names of Allah. The second ayah we're talking about is kind of the process of change that someone goes through because of the ayat of Allah, because of Quran, okay? So Allah opens up, يُسَبِّحُ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. Everything in the skies and the earth praises Allah. Adam, go back like 2. Thank you. Everything in the skies and the earth declares Allah's perfection, rather. يُسَبِّحُ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ Al-Malik, Al-Quddus, Al-Aziz, Al-Hakim. There are 4 names that Allah gives us. We're going to breeze through these, and then we're going to go back to them later a little bit, okay? Al-Malik, the king. Allah is calling himself the king. This is one of, we're familiar with like the 99 names, like the famous names of Allah. Allah picks these 4 in this order. Now the question for the believer, anyone reading Quran, should be what? Why these 4? And even more so, okay, these 4, but why this order? Yeah? Those of you who have been here for a while, you should know that we can ask these questions and should think, like, why these 4, why this order? Quran is that specific as such that we should be able to ask these questions and be able to contemplate. But anyway, just keep it in mind for now as a question. I'm not going to answer it right now. Al-Malik, the king. Al-Quddus. The Quddus could mean the holy. Like, this kind of same jidr was used, or same, root letter type word was used for like priests back in the day. Al-Quddus could be the pure, the ultimately pure, the always pure, one that could never have any filth on him. Al-Aziz is the 3rd name, the authority. So when someone's able to make rules, they're an Aziz. When someone walks in the room and everyone's quiet, that's because he has Azza or she has Azza, she has authority. And the last name, Al-Hakim, the wise. You probably heard that one before, Al-Hakim. Okay, and I put them from right to left. Okay, Adam, you can go to the next slide for now, the title slide again. Okay. The next thing that Allah talks about in the second ayah, which is going to be the majority of the time today. Okay, so everyone pay attention and ready up. This is going to be the meat of what we're trying to do today. Allah talks about He's Al-Malik and Al-Quddus and Al-Aziz and Al-Hakim. He's the king and the holy one, the pure one. And He's, what's the 3rd name? Who remembers? Al-Aziz, He's the authority. What's the 4th name? Al-Hakim, He's the wise. Now what does Allah do? That's who He is. And He's saying He's those names, and as a result, everything alive or unalive, living things and non-living things in heaven and anywhere in heaven, anywhere on earth or within the earth, is constantly declaring His perfection. The birds, the rocks, your body, whether you realize it or not, is declaring His perfection. Now the next ayah, what does it talk about? It actually talks about the Prophet ﷺ. So you can say ayah number 1 is about Allah and who He is, and ayah number 2 of the surah is about the Prophet ﷺ and not who he is, but what his job is. Does that make sense so far? So ayah number 1, who Allah is. Ayah number 2, what the job of the Messenger ﷺ is. Are we following so far? Okay. Interestingly enough, there are 4 jobs listed. So there's 4 names of Allah so far, and in ayah number 2 there's going to be 4 jobs listed for the Prophet ﷺ. So let's see what those jobs are. Before those jobs, Allah says, هُوَ الَّذِي بَعَثَ فِي الْأُمِّيِّينَ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ. Spend a little bit of time on this. He is the one, Allah is the one, meaning, who raised from the unlettered, al-ummiyin. We'll talk about that in a second. Al-ummiyin, the unlettered, the illiterate. If someone's illiterate, they're called ummi. Like, what does ummi sound like by even in Arabic for the Arabs in the room? Ummi sounds like what? Mom, like It's as illiterate as you were when you left your mother. That's what they thought of. You're as illiterate as a child, is ummi. So Allah is saying Allah's the one that decided to raise up, or who raised up, fil ummiyina, among the unlettered ones. Now, who are the unlettered ones, by the way? Who's he talking about here? Who? I heard who? Yeah, the Arab of Mecca. First and foremost, that area, the Arab in that area, he's talking about them. Mostly unlettered society by the Mecca. If you knew how to read, you were like, oh, that guy's fancy. Like, he knows how to read. He has books, I hear. It's fancy when you're in Mecca and you know how to read. Medina is different because they had a big Jewish population. Allah literally calls them in the Quran ahbar, like people that they're so learned that they have ink on their hands because they're writing. Not only can they read, but they can write too. But Mecca, ummiyin, they don't know how to read at all. They don't know how to read anything. They're as illiterate as when they came out of their mother. He's the one that raised from the unlettered, the illiterate, rasulan minhum, a messenger from among them. Who is this messenger, by the way? The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay. Remember I told you there's 4 jobs that he does? What I want you to do is I want to frame this a little bit for you before we jump in and remind you what we said in the beginning, because remember, we're talking about Ramadan and Quran. Ramadan's a month of Quran. And this ayah that we're talking about is sort of how does change actually happen in a society through Allah and His Messenger? You can think of it like that. What does change actually look like? What are the steps to change? Because look, it's really interesting Allah opened up like this. It's really interesting. Because He's saying that He sent a messenger, not just to anyone. I'll remind you that in the beginning of this I told you that there were these superpowers at the time in the world. There was a Sassanid Empire, some people call the Persian Empire. There was the Byzantine Empire. Some people call them the Roman Empire. Very, very strong, especially in terms of war. But also even the Sassanids were very learned people, very intelligent people. The Romans were kind of like white Mongols. They're very violent and very their war and stealing technology was more their vibe. But regardless, extremely powerful people. China at the time was still growing, but extremely powerful in terms of trade. Why in the world did Allah decide, from all of these on the map, these people? Why them? He could have sent Quran to the Romans. He could have sent, if you were in a position that okay, I have a very important message for mankind, who do I give it to? Who has the technology to handle this? Who has a society that can handle this message? I'll send it to the Romans, the Persians, the Chinese. And Allah decides in His wisdom, who does He choose? These Arabs. And not even just He didn't call them Arabs even. He called them what? The illiterate ones. I'm going to send it to them. You know what lesson we're already learning here, by the way? It's a beautiful... Muslims, we don't appreciate this enough, Allah, in our deen. We don't appreciate it enough. Allah is saying that this book, He's kind of hinting this, kind of like in between the lines. He's hinting that this book is meant to be so accessible. Something I think our generation can really appreciate, but anyway, as a side note. But this book, this message to mankind, the Quran, is supposed to be so accessible that even illiterate people can understand it. So accessible that even they'll get it, let alone anyone else. And you know what? Beyond that, by the way, think about this. If you had a society that was literate, put religion to the side, whether Muslim or non-Muslim, by the way, it doesn't really matter at this point. If you have a society of mostly illiterate people, men and women, and a society of mostly literate people, which one do you think will do better socially and economically and even morally? Which one does better every time? The literate people. These illiterate people, it also shows in their character that they're illiterate. It shows in their character. They're the type of people that for some reason when they have a daughter, Allah says in Quran, their face turns black. It turns as if you threw dust on their face, how depressed the men become. And what do they do when they have a daughter? What's the first thing they do? They bury her. Actually, what they used to do, some of them were so hardcore that they, when their wife was giving birth, would dig a hole, a little grave, and then she would give birth by the hole So that if it's a girl, why waste any time? Why build that emotional connection? Throw it away immediately, dig it up. There were Sahaba, by the way, like companions of the Prophet ﷺ, after Islam, that would look back and think about the daughters they killed. Umar ibn Khattab, by the way, being one of them. That same man I told you about earlier. May Allah be pleased with him. Changed man, by the way. He would tell a story about, this is the same Umar, by the way, because he's just the best example at all. And he always ends up being the best example, subhanAllah, in the story of the Sahaba. But anyway, he was telling a story, and while he was thinking about the story, rather, he was laughing, and then he cried. And he was going back between laughing and crying, and everyone's like, Umar, what's wrong? And he's like, one time, because they used to worship idols, obviously. It's like one time, I was traveling and I forgot my idol. Because you have pocket idols, apparently. It's like, you can worship them and they fit in their pocket. Imagine the commercial back in the day. Anyway, so he forgot his pocket idol, the eye idol. He forgot it. And while he's traveling, he's like, oh man, I got to pray to my idol because I'm traveling. I need to pray for blessing or trouble, whatever, however they think. Anyway, but he had dates with him, like Tamir. He had dates with him. So he's like, all right, well, he made the idol out of dates, and he prayed to the date idol. And then later on, he's like, I got hungry. So I didn't have anything else, so I ate the idol. And he was like, later when he's a Muslim, obviously, people seeing him laughing, crying, because he's like, it's so funny. But then he cries because he's like, how dumb. Like, look how lost we were. He also, by the same man, Umar al-Khattab, later during Islam, he would say, we used to think women were nothing. We used to think they were less than property. And then Islam came and things changed. So much changed. Like when Allah chose these people, al-Ummiyin, these illiterate, backwards, immoral. Can I give you one more example? Okay. You know how like we have that show, the disgusting show, I don't know if it still goes on, was it Maori? The one that's like, you are not the father. The guy's like dancing. You know that show? Okay, what is it? Whatever, I don't watch it. Anyway, okay, so you shouldn't watch that show. Okay, so you know what they had back in the day? Because they would like literally, they were so promiscuous, I'll say. They were so promiscuous, the men and the women, that they would literally like swap partners for the night, which is not foreign for us as Americans. We hear about that all the time online, but they would swap like spouses for a night or two and like have like handshake deals. And anyway, it's disgusting stuff. But the women were also so promiscuous that when they had a child, they had no idea who the father, how could they possibly know who the father is? Again, not very foreign. I mean, this happens nowadays also. But anyway, it happened back then too. So they were so promiscuous that when they did have a baby, the idea, they had their own, what is it called, Murray, whatever. They had their own version of that where some sheikh, some version of a sheikh or something would be like, he looks at the baby, then scans the dads, be like, he's the father. And everyone would dance. And I don't know about the dancing part. But the idea is that it's backwards. Imagine about the kids, like how a kid raises and doesn't even know for sure. It's like a 1 in 10 chance that you're my dad and I don't even know who the other 9 options are. You know what I mean? It's a disgusting society that they reduce themselves to. And Allah took them and gave them Qur'an. And history speaks for itself what happened to them afterwards. The change that happened to the men, like these same men, the same men and women that buried their daughters and were promiscuous and did much else that I didn't mention, are the same men that entered Persia and took it over. And they did not, you know how they say like Islam was spread by the sword. They were so influential to the people of Persia that nearly all of Persia became Muslim within the next 100 years because they went to the Muslims like, why are you guys so different? And then history speaks for itself what happened after that. He turned the Ummiyin, guys, think about that, wallah. The Ummiyin into those same men became the men and women that opened up Persia. بَعْثَ فِي الْأُمِّيِّينَ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ. Allah makes the best decision. I don't know what else to say. Now, how did these men and women turn from that to how we know them now? What is that process? Now, finally, I'll shut up and start this process. Okay. Step number 1 of how many again?
4.
Thank you. 4. Step number 1. يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ. He recites onto them their signs. Tala yatlu is actually for like, it's used for like you know when a duckling follows the mom by the tail? like tail, even tala yatlu, tail. It's kind of like the similar word. But when the baby follows the mother step by step, that's tala yatlu. When you follow along, like when you're reading, even your eyes are going to the next letter, the next word. That's that same word. So he's reciting onto people to the point where they can follow along with him. يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ. And ayah, by the way, when I say ayah, like what word comes, how would you translate that ayah? Verse, okay? So what's happening, if I can put it in images, is the Prophet ﷺ, and he's reciting, because the Prophet also was ummi, by the way. So he was also illiterate himself. So Allah taught him that literacy through his heart, and he would recite the ayahs. You can think of it as step number 1, ayahs are recited on a community. Ayahs are recited on a person. Now this idea of ayah being verse is a little bit misguided, so let's talk about that a little bit. Ayah does not translate, first of all, to verse. That word has nothing to do with literature at all. Because verse, you think about poetry, you think about the Bible even. That word ayah has nothing to do with poetry or writing or anything. That word means a couple of things. One, people back then used to say, خَرَجَ الْقَوْمِ بِآيَاتِهِمْ. Like, imagine that people were traveling and then they set up a campfire and they set up a camp. And then the next day they pick up all their valuables and they go. They used to say, خَرَجَ الْقَوْمِ بِآيَاتِهِمْ. The people that were here, they took all their valuables, all their ayahs, and they left. So the number one thing about the word ayah, it is something of value. Like you wouldn't leave behind an ayah. Like I wouldn't leave behind my phone when I leave here tonight. I'm going to take my ayah, my valuable thing, and I'm going to leave with it. That's number one. The other thing about ayah, it's something that convinces you. Ayah is another word in Arabic. We don't use it a lot today, but the people used to use it as which means yes, absolutely. Like we say nowadays, like in colloquial or whatever. And Fusha we have na'am. But back then they also used to use which is like emphatically yes, absolutely yes. From that we get that ayah is actually something that convinces you. Something that when you hear it, you're like, that is absolutely the truth. It's something of value, something that you cannot forget. Ayah also is like when a flower blossoms. So it's something beautiful. And that all those meanings are under the main meaning of ayah, which is actually a sign. An ayah is a sign. And a sign, like what's the purpose of a sign? A sign like right now, like look at that exit sign, that's an ayah. That points you to the right way. When there's danger, you look for that ayah and you're guided now. So an ayah can warn. A sign, for example, would be like, if you step here, you'll fall, or whatever the case may be. If you step on this crack, you'll break your mom's back. That could be an ayah as well. It's warning you. It can guide you or warn you or give you good news. It's something that when you read it, you have guidance in your life. So ayah, you can say, if you're going to put it in a word, verse is probably not good. It's a miraculous sign. It's something convincing. It's something that points to something that should guide you. So he recites onto them their signs. Now let me talk about it about this first step in modern times. Let's say, for example, all Tanzeel was, did the mic just die? Okay, that's fine. It still looks nice for the camera, so that's good. Can you guys still hear me in the back? Yeah. Okay, so let's pretend, for example, that all Tanzeel was that I bring my laptop and I press play on like Al-Afasi or whatever, Al-Afasi, excuse me, a famous reciter, and I press play and Quran plays. Okay, that is, technically, he's reciting onto you ayat. Technically, right? Like he's reciting, or like when you go to Salah and like you hear someone reciting for like an hour or whatever, that's technically someone reciting ayat to you, technically. Are you following me so far? That's not exactly what this ayah is actually calling for though. What this step number 1, that's not exactly what it's calling for. What's wrong? Oh, okay. Okay, thanks. Oh, you have another one? Okay. I'll wait a little bit. No, you're good. I charged it, really. I did my part. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Okay, is that better? All right, sorry guys. Okay, bismillah. What was I saying? Just ayah. Okay. What I was saying was, this is one that it sounds obvious, like for people to know about what Allah wants from us, or people know what guidance is. You would think, well, obviously you got to tell people what it is first. Obviously, like give them the information, let them make their own decision. That's kind of step number 1. What I'm calling out here is this is you have to really think about this. If someone were like, if Sheikh Kifaf, I invited him and I'm just like, can you please just recite? Like, utlu alayhim ayatillah. recite onto them the signs of Allah. And he just picked a random surah, like he picked Ali Imran, and recited the whole thing. Ali Imran's like 30-something pages. And it takes, whatever, maybe an hour to listen to, maybe, I don't know, I didn't count. That actually isn't what this first step is calling for. Because even if you hear it, which is good, by the way, it cleanses you, and I won't get into that right now. You hear it, and it's good for you that you hear it. Like maybe you are even in the habit, and maybe, inshallah, that you don't understand it, but it calms you, so you listen to it in the car, for example. That still wouldn't be يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ, that he recites onto them his signs. He recites onto the people the signs of his master. That's not what that means. Remember I told you tala yatlu, to follow? What's supposed to be the first step is that we introduce the ayat of Allah to people in a way that they actually get it. In a way they actually understand. Because if you were to put this back in the day, who's actually doing this first step back in Mecca? Who's doing it? Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's the one actually doing it, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? And what it looks like is he's just reciting the ayahs, and they understand because they speak what? Arabic. They know Arabic. They know it well. So when they hear it, they get it. There's no lesson that needs to be had. But that's not how we are right now, at least not for us. Like in the Arab world, you can say that's probably enough. Maybe you can say that's enough. But for us here and now, because I'm concerned about here, like in Orland Park even specifically, for us in our community, that's kind of actually not enough. That's not good enough. I would even go as far as to say it's not good enough that all we teach people is how to read and how to pronounce it properly. That's not good enough. That's not yatlu alayhim ayatihi. It's not. Because then it doesn't sink. They don't know what's actually being said. They would have no idea that the ayah that was just recited is the solution to their problem, and they'll have no idea. Because maybe they speak Arabic, but they don't speak Quran. Because it's a little bit different. Or maybe they have no Arabic. The majority of Muslims, even in America, are not Arab. My best friend, he's half black, half white. How do you do yatlu alayhim ayatihi to him? You can't just recite Quran, you have to teach him. Here's what this means. So step number 1 is you make it known what the ayahs of Allah are. I would argue like that is actually the purpose of this program. This program is not tafsir. This program is not for educational purposes. This program, the idea behind the program is let's just give people a chance to make the decision for themselves. Let's do yatlu alayhim ayatihi, and they'll have some understanding of even an ayah, whatever. They'll come for one time. By the way, raise your hand if you were here last year for anything. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so barely any of you. So 10, 15% of you. You know what that means? I think about this a lot, about Tanzeel. That means, and we have, on the WhatsApp group, we have almost 400 people. And usually when you join the group, like you're here and I give you the phone and you scan, or one of the volunteers gives you the phone and they scan. You know what that tells me? That tells me that the majority of people that have ever been in this program were here maybe once, twice, and they had some experience of yatlu alayhim ayati. Because what we do here is we pick a passage, we go through it in English, we talk about what it could mean, like how people understand it, ways that you can apply it to your life, so on and so forth. And they take it and they go. They make their own decision after that. Maybe they never come back again. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. The first step doesn't care what you do with it. The first step is let's bring Allah's ayahs to people in a way that they can actually understand them. That's step number 1. It's not really education. You understand this so far, right? Let's just deliver it to them. And by the way, if yatlu alayhi, he recites onto them their signs. So the audience, are they doing any work right now so far? Is any work on the audience so far? Nope. Who's the work on? The Prophet ﷺ. Yatlu alayhim ayatihi. He recites. Who's the one doing the reciting? Is the Prophet ﷺ. He's doing the reciting. Everyone else is just listening, even if passively. Like how we put this stuff on YouTube. Maybe someone's working out or they're driving and they're maybe paying attention, maybe not, but they put it on the side. Yatlu alayhim ayatihi. Give it to people, let them see for themselves what they want to do. That's step number 1. He recites onto them his miraculous signs. Number 2, I love this one. You ready? This is going to be a little bit. Okay, in a little bit. وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. What does yuzakkihim mean? Who knows? And he cleanses them. Actually, yuzakkihim, like zakat? Like what's zakat? If I say it like that, what's that? Charity. It's like Every year, you're supposed to take whatever money is saved for a full year that was untouched. You take 2.5%, you give it in charity. That's zakat. But zakat actually means, in that form, it means two things. It means to purify, meaning you're giving away that wealth with the intention, Ya Allah, any filthiness in my wealth, please clean it because of this bit that I cut off for you. This 2.5%. And the second meaning is actually growth. Zakat, growth. Meaning your money will grow if you actually practice zakat. But we're not talking about zakat specifically, we're talking about the word itself. Zakka yuzakki, it means to grow, to nurture. Like if you have like a baby or like a son or a daughter, and you nurture them up, and you give them good food, and you teach them right from wrong, and you correct their mistakes, you're doing tazkiyah. Maybe you heard that word before, tazkiyah, purification. You're doing tazkiyah on them. وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, and He cleanses them, and He purifies them. He cleans them, He nurtures them. He even, you can say, He accompanies them. He's among them, so He's with them. He's cleaning their bad habits. He's polishing them even. وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. Now here's the thing. When I say that, maybe the first thing that comes to your mind is He's spiritually cleansing them. Like when He says the ayat to them, it cleans them spiritually. What I'm trying to argue right now is Quran goes beyond cleansing spiritually. That is a big part of Quran. Is that you literally, when even just reciting it, listening to it, you're being cleaned. Like sins are falling off of you. That's 100% true. But actually, and Adam, if you can go to the next slide. I'll give him a minute. Oh wow, you're quick, Adam. I like Adam. He's awesome, Allah. There wouldn't have been an interruption if it wasn't for me. Okay. This cleansing that Quran does to people is beyond spiritual. And this is, I want to focus mostly on this because I think this is where maybe our community is at, maybe. I think we're actually even a little bit impeded in step one. Like, we don't do a great job in our community of yatlu alayhim ayatihi. We don't do a good job of like, here's what Quran says, by the way. You should know this because you're 25 and Muslim. So you should know what Quran says because you're Muslim. We don't do a good job at that part. But once we do that, what will automatically, naturally happen is this, وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. Now, this cleansing can be on a spiritual level. So, for example, Allah purifies what it means to be spiritually clean. He talks about salah, and for example, even in Ramadan, Allah says that like saum, fasting, that will cleanse you, that will purify you. So it's like a lot of people really try to complicate what purification is, when in reality Allah gives simple instructions like just fast Ramadan, or just pray and that will clean you, or قُولُوا قَوْلًا سَدِيدًا, speak forward, speak straightforward. Don't be weird in your speech, just be straightforward, be upfront with people, be clear with people, and Allah will clean you. Just simple steps. Allah says that if you do them, it will spiritually clean you. But it does a lot more than just spiritual cleansing. I don't want to say just spiritual, that's important, but it does more than spiritual cleansing. There's intellectual cleansing. The way that we think becomes cleaner. The way, really think about this, because you guys, I'm sure you're chronically online like I am. What do you think of people's thought process nowadays? Is it good or poor? The average person, I would say. Even influencers, by the way. The way they think is, well, it's weird and it's disturbing sometimes. But and some of you are chuckling, but the idea is, though, here is if we don't get the way that we think from a good source, these people, we're like ping pong balls with these people. So a young man, for example, if I were to go back like 10, 15 years, your influencers for young, because you guys are targeted, you're like a target demographic for a lot of influencers. Like you guys too, from different people, but I know you a little bit more because I'm one of you. So you'll have some influencers that, especially 10, 15 years ago, like pre-Andrew Tate era, you'll have some people pulling your thinking towards the blue. Like, you need to be, this is what a real man is. And it brings you into, like, and then you feel weird when you follow it. And then you have the Andrew Tate era. And then he's pulling you, actually, women are dumb and you should, and he pulls you that way. And you laugh, but wallah, we fall for it every time because it's enticing. It is, and it works. There's millions of dollars behind the Andrew Tates of the world. This thinking, the red-pilled society or whatever they call themselves. The idea is that if you are not careful, the way that you think will be dictated by whatever you're surrounded with. And for us, that's TikTok and Reddit and Twitter and all these different things. The Quran came and it cleansed the way people thought. Remember what Umar said? We used to think people were, or women were nothing. Remember? That was how we thought. And then Quran came, يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ, the signs were recited to us, and we learned. We got intellectually cleansed. We now know what a woman is. We now know the value of a woman. Intellectual cleaning. That's something Quran will give you. That doesn't pull you left and right. You're not going to be some idiot in the breeze. That if the wind blows this way in this decade, you go that way, and then it blows this way, and now you think that way. Man or woman, by the way, because we become very stupid. We're not impervious to this as Muslims, by the way. We're a consumer like anyone else is. They do not care. The people that make these algorithms do not care that you're Muslim. It doesn't matter anymore. Because when you spend your time just doing this, and I do too, I'm not making fun of you, Ani, I'm with you. I fall for the brain rot too. But when you do that all the time, you don't realize that your thinking is being swayed. And you notice it because now your language changes. Because later on you'll use the same language that an influencer used, and you'll be like, in the back of your head, be like, that wasn't me. I learned that from someone. This is why him, and he cleanses them intellectually also. The Quran is the only religious book that demands people to think. We talked about this multiple times at Tanzeel, but a lot of you are new here. This is the only religious book on earth that demands the reader to think. Why don't you think? أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, and it's different variations of عَقَلَ يَعْقِلُ, to think, is mentioned over 70 times. Mainly to people who do shirk or worship other gods or whatever, but the idea is it tells you to think. There's a part of Quran says that go and search the earth and excavate the earth and find out how Allah started creation. What book says that? What book tells a person to do that? Religion, traditionally tells a person never leave the church, never leave the temple. The outside world will corrupt you. And Allah says, go to the earth and think. Think about how Allah made stuff. Think about society. It intellectually cleanses you. I made that point clear so far, inshallah? Okay. Physically, it cleans you as well. Like one obvious example is like you have wudu instructions in Quran, for example, where it teaches you to be clean. Literally teaches you to be clean. Now, by the way, we probably don't appreciate that enough. But if you were to talk to, for example, like a Pakistani Muslim, that kind of, because like Palestinians in the room, by the way, how many people are Palestinian in the room? Okay, one thing we don't realize is our relationship with Zionism is a lot of like Pakistani Indian Muslims' relationship with the Hindutva. You guys might not know the Hindu. You should look into the Hindutva. It's basically Indian Zionism. It's the same thing, different people. It's the same thing. They're a supremacist Hindu group. Now, Hinduism, and there's a lot of memes about stuff online, but if you are like an Indian or Pakistani Muslim in India, and a lot of them are being persecuted, may Allah help them. It's not something that Muslims, at least in our community, that we talk about a lot, but they're being persecuted by that government. It doesn't reach news like Zionism does for us, but they are being persecuted by the hand of the Hindutva in India. May Allah preserve them. But they know, like this physical cleansing that you and I don't really appreciate, because we know to take showers and to clean ourselves, and I'm not going to get into that. We know that enough. We're to the point that if I'm when I was at school, because I was raised Muslim. When I was at school and someone didn't wash their hands after the bathroom, I'm like, bro, that's like second grade. What's wrong with you? You know what I mean? It's just disgusting. But I didn't realize at the time it's because the Quran did that for me. Like it cleansed the way that I think about physical purity. But going back to the example, like an Indian Pakistani Muslim compared to like a Hindu that wants to that harm him, for example, in that society, there's a big difference in the cleanliness. Like one is literally like the Quran gave that person physical purity. Like I know how to keep myself clean. And they can literally compare it to someone who doesn't, and I'll leave it at that. But you get the idea. Also, what we eat, what we put into our bodies. Doesn't Allah have restrictions on what we eat? And if you look at how Allah defines clean meat versus the meat that we eat, is there not a huge difference? Is there not a huge difference? Doesn't Allah push you to take care of your body and to treat it like a trust, like something that was gifted to you? That's a mentality shift. That's cleansing of what it means to have a physical body. There's emotional cleansing in the book, emotional tazkiyah. Over and over, not so far even from the beginning of the book, is anxiety talked about, depression talked about, happiness talked about. rushing to things. We talked about that last Tanzeel. Rushing, Allah tackles how rushing to things can cause you to slip up and do evil even. I've heard from multiple people that Quran is like, you could look at it as like a book of psychology. So many emotional lessons. Actually, by the way, as a little tidbit, you know how I said during Ramadan we're going to do every week, inshallah? It's going to be a surah that is mostly about emotional cleansing. So if you want an example of what that means, we're going to do that during Ramadan. A surah that is basically almost all about emotional tazkiyah, emotional cleansing in Allah's words. I guarantee it's going to be beautiful. So shameless plug. Anyway, the next one, financial cleansing. Allah has simple instructions. So for example, don't cheat, this is an ayah, don't cheat other in money matters and don't bribe politicians. Quran talking about political corruption through lobbying in all its forms. Literally, it's talking about bribing, which is what is lobbying, is legal bribing politicians. By the way, all of these things I'm introducing as separate things, but I want you to realize they're all connected. So let me give you an example through the financial means. Think about how we view marriage. Like especially Arabs in the room, you guys might appreciate this. Okay, so when you want to get married, how much money do you think you need? Whatever it is, double it. So you need, in our culture, to get married, we put did Quran do that, by the way? No. So we put in our culture that if you want to get married, you're going to have, if I say the word, I might lose you for the rest of the night, so I'm not going to say the number. So anyway, you need a lot of money. Okay? Now, why do you need a lot of money? Is because, your cousin had a really nice wedding. And haram alayk, you can't do that to your mom. So you're going to need $70,000 because we need an elephant to carry your wife in the room. You think I'm joking, actually, but that is you need an elephant to carry you in the room, and then she needs to step down on a puma, and then on a raccoon, and then she can be then she could be down to earth. Pun intended. And that's why, and then, because the elephant costs this much, and then you need the zookeeper and bubble, And you laugh, but this is like, you laugh now, but you'll cry later, because you'll hear stories like that of this is what it means to be married now. Quran did not give this to us, our culture. A lot of our culture gave this to us, right? Now the problem with that is in Quran what Allah calls out as israf. Israf is overspending, like you're going too far. You're obviously going too far. Allah says that when you spend, don't be cheap. You don't need to get the generic brand if you don't have to. But don't do israf. Don't buy 5 packets of Oreos. But don't get Hydrox. What's wrong with you? Get 1 pack, and that'll be enough. Right? Like you're supposed to be bayna dhalika qawama. You're supposed to not be too cheap, not do israf. Yes? But we have a culture of extreme, and us right here, a culture of extreme israf. Like, let me stick to weddings, for example. Okay, so now you have a culture of extreme israf. So now young men are like, I literally can't afford this, and I feel like no one wants to marry me, or my mom won't get me married, my dad, because I don't make that much money, because, I go to college, but I, just finished, and the market's bad, and whatever, I'm working at a mechanic shop, or I can't afford that, but I really like this girl, and I really think it can work out, and now they can't get married. And by the way, because of this israf, follow along with me, it was a financial filth that led to now marriage filth, or like a familial filth, familial dirtiness, because now when you make the halal easy, meaning marriage, or hard, forgive me, when you make marriage difficult, what becomes easy? Zina. Forget this, let's just elope. I'm not going to let go of you. And your dad won't marry me to you because I don't make 6 figures. What? Let's just go. Forget this Islam stuff. And so then now they move maybe to a different state where they have no family to support them. Which, by the way, you need family to support you, even in marriage. Believe it or not, you do. I know it's annoying, but you do need family around you. You have 100%. But you, because you really wanted to marry her, or whatever, or not you, this person, now they elope, and now they're having marital issues, and now he can't handle the stress, so he starts drinking. You see how one domino, wallah, hits the other? This is, yuzakkihim, is extremely important. Because even solving just one of these things, like we clean what we think about marriage. We clean what we think about money. We clean what we think about showing off to others. You'll see just life just becomes so easy, man. This is what Quran does. وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. Then you have the familial, I'll finish these off. Just some things about family, for example. This is so interesting to me. You will have mothers and fathers who are the furthest from the Quran. When their kid hits teenage years and they start acting up, what is the one ayah that all of them have memorized as a software update as soon as you're born? Is what? وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. Well, we don't have this, but they shake their head. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. I don't know how that comes default to parenthood. Is that ayah gets zapped in you even if you're not practicing? That you know that one because when your kid pisses you off, that's what you can just do, and now you're a good parent now, mashallah, you've done your job. That's not how this works. Allah cleans the way you think about family. The role of a man is cleaned. The role of a woman in a household is cleaned. The role of children is cleaned. There's a balance, by the way, between the rights of parents and the rights of children. Now, in our society, which one has the more? The parents or the children? Parents. We don't talk about rights of children. Children have rights. Like, for example, we're taught that dua, رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا. We're supposed to say this dua for our parents. رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا. My Master, have mercy on both of them, both of my parents. كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. Because of how they nurtured me, because of how they loved me and took care of me when I grew up. Meaning, if you don't do the loving and the caring, you can't expect anything of your kid. There's no religious precedent for you to be to abandon your kid, neglect them, drink, and then give them an unstable environment. And when they're 20 and want to marry someone you don't like, you go, what are you talking about? Are you dumb? That's not Quran. وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. You understand? It takes away all that filth of your understanding of what family's supposed to be. And then finally societal, which is you can think of it as culture. Culture has a place in the deen, by the way. Culture, by the way, is so powerful in our deen that it can even influence Islamic Sharia, like law. Meaning the way that a wedding should look in Sharia is actually, okay, what does your society do? Maybe you live in a community of elephant herders, then get to the elephant, whatever. I like the elephant a lot, so I go back to that. You get what I mean, though? It depends, but it has its place. It's not supposed to step out. That culture of yours should not step out its place. Meaning maybe, in African culture, for example, there's I don't know a lot about African culture, but in the African Muslim culture, in America, you'll see a lot more kind of ease between men and women. It's a lot more lax. Okay, well, maybe that has to be cleaned up a little bit. You understand? You can keep everything. You can keep African Muslims, by the way, are smiley, happy people, by the way. Tough people also, mashallah. That's just culture. That's beautiful. Islam actually, the way it was described to me before, between Islam and culture, is you think about a stream of water, of pure, clean water, going over the dirt, and maybe dirt changes color throughout the stream's journey, right? And you can still see the dirt. You can still see the culture. You can still see the earth. But what's there cleaning it constantly is the book of Allah. You understand? It's supposed to be there, but it's supposed to keep its place. If that dirt is toxic, you have to get rid of that toxicity. Which, as an Arab, we have a lot of toxicity on you, right? And it oversteps its bounds. Yeah? We have this really dumb culture of if you're a young man in the house, you can go out and you can go out until 1 a.m. It doesn't matter because you're a boy. But if you're a girl, if you're not home by 5 p.m., then a shoe will be thrown at your face. When in reality, both are stupid. Both should be back by 5 p.m. In reality, yes? Okay, that's just me. Anyway, that's step 2. وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. Going back to step 1 and 2 and reviewing a little bit so far, when you give people the ayat of Allah and you teach them what Allah has to say about certain things, it's as if you're pouring water on them. They can't help but be purified. Some way they thought, or something they felt, or some thing they believed about themselves or about their spouse or about their children, they're oh, that's not what Allah says. Allah wants me to think differently. Right? So they get cleaned. The last 2 will go a little bit quickly because we're running out of time. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابِ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. Adam, you can go to actually, no, don't go to the next slide. Leave it here for a little bit. Okay, sorry. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابِ is step number 3, and the 4th one is وَالْحِكْمَةِ. يُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابِ, and he teaches them, so he recites onto them the ayat, he informs them, you can think, he informs them what the ayat are, then he cleanses them of any impurity from any walk of life. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابِ, and then he teaches them the book. I want to go back to this word, the book, because when I say the book, what do you think of? The Quran. That's not what that actually means. So I'll go back to that in a second. For now, he teaches them kitab. We'll go back to what that means. And step number 4, these two are kind of a little bit together. They go hand in hand. And he teaches them hikmah. What's hikmah? Wisdom. Wisdom, okay? Now, what does it mean he teaches them the book? The book can mean a couple of things. It can mean that any decree of Allah, like if he decides someone dies or someone lives, that's the kitab of Allah. Any decree whatsoever. Any rule that he established. So one rule, for example, he established is that he and his messengers will always win. Sallallahu alayhi salam, ajmain. That no matter what the story, at the end of the story, Allah and the messenger wins. That's actually a rule of Allah in Quran. That's a kitab. That's a kitab. One other kitab, for example, when Allah created everything and He situated Himself on His throne, He says that one decree He made over all creation before we were put on earth actually. He decreed over all creation, that famous decree, this famous kitab, that my mercy outweighs my anger. That's actually a law of Allah He put on Himself, a kitab of Allah. But also kitab just means law. So things you're allowed to do in Islam, things you're not allowed to do. The Quran is not a book of rules. This is how we're kind of raised to think of Quran. The Quran is like maybe like less than 30% rules, maybe. It's hard to put a percentage. It's a very actually small portion of the book. Relative to everything else talked about, a small portion is dedicated to rules. Fun fact, by the way, do you guys know if you take all the ayats of all the different laws of Quran, all the Sharia from Quran, do you know which aspect, whether it's stealing or interest or money or marriage or divorce or whatever, do you know what aspect of life has the most laws according to Quran? What has the most restrictions? Inheritance? No. Good guess. Divorce. Good job. We talked about this, you cheater. That's my sister-in-law. She's smarter than me, mashallah. So, divorce actually has the most laws of anything. Marriage, by the way, very little. Subhanallah. So he gave the skeleton of what a marriage should look like, and the rest is kind of up to you what it should look like. It's actually, one day I'm going to talk to you about marriage in Quran. I get so excited about that. It's beautiful lessons we take from the book about that. Beautiful tazkiyah, like we said. But then divorce actually is like, if you're going to divorce a woman, here are the restrictions. By the way, all of them are about you. None of them are about you. So they're all things you have to do. They're all things that you get, actually, and they're all things you have to give. So that's how Allah decided. But anyway, in His wisdom. So, وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابِ, and He teaches them the law. Let me bring you back. He teaches them the law. But He also teaches them what? Wisdom. Now, the way you think about this is this. Have you guys ever heard the adage, like the letter of the law and the spirit of the law? Have you guys ever heard this before? Okay, when we say the letter of the law, we mean like, I'll give you an example of this, how exactly you're supposed to pray. Like, where should your toes be facing? Where do you place your hands? How do you make wudu beforehand? Where do you face? What can you recite? What can you do? What you cannot do? That is the letter of the law, the rules you can say. That's yu'allimuhum al-kitab. Where does hikmah come in? You can argue that's actually the spirit of the law, meaning you are supposed to stand like this in prayer. That's the letter of the law. But the spirit of the law is, what is salah about? What's the point of it? What's the point of salah? And Allah talks about that too, by the way. He says that it purifies you, that it actually protects you from fahsha and munkar. It protects you from sexual immorality. Salah is actually, that's one of the purposes of it. SubhanAllah. That's the hikmah. That's the spirit of that law. Is it protects you from sexual immorality, and it protects you from munkar, from just evil in general. From doing evil. Meaning you're texting that guy and then dhuhr adhans and you're like, how am I going to stand in front of Allah? And then in my heart I'm thinking about, nah, I'm not doing that. You see what I mean? That's the spirit. So another example of this, for example, is the letter of the law and hijab. You know, that's in Surah Nur, by the way. In Surah Nur, Allah talks about like that's where the ordainment of hijab was released in Surah Nur, in that surah. But also what was given is not just how to wear it, because how to wear it is there, but also what it's for, which is a beautiful ayah. And it's not what you think. What it's for is not what you think. Hijab was not released and revealed to us because men don't look at you. I've heard one time, I really hate this. One time I've heard a young lady say to a class of non-Muslims, by the way, that the reason that we wear hijab as women is so we don't get raped. And I'm like, no, it's nothing to do with that. There's nothing. You have the kitab, right, that you have to wear hijab, but you don't have the what? The what? What's in the ayah? Hikmah. You don't have this. You don't have the wisdom behind it. It, by the way, has nothing to do with men. Later on, we'll talk about that, inshallah. But you see, when you divorce these two things from each other, when you're a person that is all about kitab, the law, but you have no hikmah, you become a fool. Wallah, you become a fool. You follow all these rules, and by the way, we're supposed to follow the kitab. I'm not excusing any of us from any of the kitab of Allah. For example, fasting is a kitab. Literally, kutiba alaykum as-siyam. Allah has written on you, has made law on you that you're supposed to fast. Yes? But then there's a reason behind fasting that you're supposed to learn too. When you are a person of just the letter of the law and no wisdom on how to apply it, or who it applies to, or why we do it, then your Islam becomes soulless, man. It becomes soulless. It becomes a lot of, do this, because Allah said so, and you lose all of the wisdom. Can I give you an example of someone that understands kitab and hikmah together? And I'll give you an example of this. Is actually the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, Aisha. The youngest wife. And she, we got to talk about Aisha someday. She was arguably the first scholar of Islam. Genius woman. Feisty woman, by the way, too. Very angry lady. We love her, wallahi, our mother. We refer to the wives of the Prophet as our mother. Amazing woman. I highly recommend both sides. We need to learn about her and give her right. Anyway, after the Prophet ﷺ died, someone was asking her about Quran and it's about specific rules in the book. You know what she said? She was sharing, because she's like, why do you want to know this rule? Like, why are you asking about this rule? And they're basically coming at the thing of like, well, we just had Islam where I'm from, and they were from, I think, modern day Iraq, I think at the time. We just got Islam where I'm from. I want to tell these people what to do. And you know what? She slowed the guy down, and she's like, you know what? This is a beautiful lesson. Listen, this is someone who understands kitab and hikmah together, so listen to this. She said, if the first ayahs of Quran were the prohibition of alcohol, which, because alcohol is prohibited, it's a kitab. It's a law that we're not allowed to drink alcohol. She said if the first ayat that came down, meaning like in Mecca, like first year, because it was 23 years it was revealed, right? By the way, alcohol and hijab and Ramadan and literally almost any law you can think of was not revealed in the first 13 years. Even the direction of prayer changed year 2. Ramadan was not until, I think, year 20. That's crazy. Like, Allah took His time. These people are not ready yet. No, okay, year 13, not ready yet. Year 14, not ready yet. Year 15, not ready yet. Year 20, 21-ish. Okay, now hijab. Like that late. Ramadan is a Madini surah. It's at least 13 years in that Muslims were not doing Ramadan, fasting the 30 days until year 13, 14, because they weren't ready for it yet. You see, what we do when someone converts is we're like, you converted, congratulations, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to divorce your husband because he's najis now, you have to do this. No, that's not a joke. A lady left Islam because the first thing a sheikh told her was, you now have to divorce your kafir husband. Dude, she's not ready for that yet. Relax, calm down. That is a lot of kitab and not a lot of what, everyone? Hikmah. It's not a lot. Let me go back to Aisha. I'm sorry, I feel like I have ADHD today. Let me go back to Aisha. Okay. She said, if the first ayat of Allah that came down to us were don't drink alcohol and don't do zina, don't have sex outside of marriage, the people would have responded, we'll never stop drinking alcohol and we'll never stop having sex outside of marriage. We'll never do it. And she's probably right. It wasn't the time for that yet. Rather, the first ayat that came down were about purpose. This is me explaining a little bit. We're about purpose, we're about Jannah, we're about Jahannam, we're about who Allah is, we're about hikmah, why this matters. It was a lot of yatlu alayhim ayati, a lot of yuzakkihim, a lot of purification. And then eventually when the people were so in love with the ayat of Allah, so in love with the deen, that when alcohol came down as a prohibition, if it was in their hands, they would spill it out. If it was in their mouth, they'd spit it out, and there's accounts of this. There are even accounts that some people had just drank it for lunch, and they induced vomit on themselves because they're like, I don't want anything that Allah has kitab, I don't want it in my body. Like, that's how ready they are. What we do, okay, so this is step 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me just quickly review because I'm going over. Step number 1 was what, everyone? He recites the ayat onto them. He just informs them of the ayat. Step number 2 is what? وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, he purifies them, he cleanses them. Step number 3, he teaches them what? Al-Kitab, which is the law. And step number 4, he teaches them what? Al-Hikmah, the wisdom. You know what we do nowadays? We do يُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابِ يُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابِ يُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابِ يُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابِ. Law. That's all we do. If I had a 10-year-old son right now, I'm going to complain right now a little bit. If I had a 10-year-old son and I want him to love Allah, and I brought him, forgive me, I love my masjid, I'm not going to, but I have to be a little bit real. And I didn't know how to teach my kid. Not a lot of people know how to teach their kid Quran, which you should, but it's not an excuse, you should. It's your responsibility to teach your kids. I don't care if you don't have them planned to teach them. You should be the ones doing yatlu alayhim ayatihi to them, reciting the ayat onto them. That's your responsibility before any masjid or sheikh or teacher, I don't care who. It's not Sunday school's job, it's your job. So that's number 1. But let's say I don't know how to do it, and I have a 10-year-old boy, and I'm like, all right, I want him to love Quran like I do. And I look, to our masjid. Or I'll look to Bridgeview. I'll look to any masjid. I don't care which masjid. They can teach him how to read, and then if he's super special, they'll teach him how to recite properly. Like they'll spend 10 hours on your solid is not solid enough. It's as, not as. It's aqa, not aq. You're going, I can hear it. It's not qalqala enough. Aq, aba. Step, his hand, I've been through that before. I get that. And that's, by the way, important stuff or no? Important stuff. It is important stuff. The learning how to read, learning how to recite, I'm not saying that's wrong. All I'm saying is if he does that and he's 11 and he does the other thing of reciting properly and now he's 12, guess what happens next? Nothing. Nothing happens next. By the way, how much of Quran does he understand now? Nothing. Nothing. Was there any yatlu alayhim ayatihi in any of that even? Nothing. Was there any yuzakkihim and he purifies them? Nothing. He knows a lot of kitab, a lot of laws. The qalqala, oh my God. The sad is perfect. Man, we are messing up. Really, we're messing up. Like we took this process of change and did nothing but the kitab part. And even when we do that part, we have no what? Wisdom. So we're chasing people away. You know how many of my friends, like I grew up in this masjid, okay? And if I were to have, I have a mental image in my head of 50 guys I knew, and I think only 3 are still here. The rest were chased away because of some bad experience or someone that had a lot of kitab and not a lot of hikmah. So many of my friends didn't make it because of that. A lot of them. Alhamdulillah, were good. A lot of them didn't make it because we didn't follow this process. Let me go back to the beginning of all this, yes? We're entering the month of Ramadan. The month of Ramadan, like I said in the beginning, what is the primary purpose of it is what? Before fasting even. Quran, reconnecting to the book. You need to think not just about the community, your kids, whatever. Where are you in this process? Have you had Quran, the ayats recited onto you? Do you know what the Quran says? Do you know? Do you know anything about it? If someone asks you, summarize the Quran for me, do you have an answer? I would bet a lot of us don't. Has any of your life changed or been cleaned because of Quran? I would assume no. Do you have a good grasp of the actual laws, even though that's the only focus our community has? I would actually bet you don't. Do you know any hikmah? I'm sorry, but I don't. I don't have a lot of hikmah. I'm trying to learn myself. Maybe you do, but you probably got that on your own. My thing I'm trying to push you towards this Ramadan, try to connect to the Quran in a different way this year. Don't just play it in the car when you go to the gym. And recite it. Don't get me wrong. Read it and recite it, please. You should. You need to. We all have to. Whether it's in English translation or whatever. All I'm saying is take the extra step and try to understand what's going on. One thing I can recommend right away, everything we've done in the past year and a half has been recorded. All you have to do is go on YouTube. There's literally, when I'm saying yatlu alayhim ayatihi, that you have nothing you have to do except for do a YouTube search. We've done a year and a half of this stuff. Just listen to it. We did all of Fatiha, for example. You should at least know Fatiha, guys, at least. We did at least 4 or 5 hours of just what Fatiha means. aren't you a little interested in the thing that you say 17 times a day? Like, are you a little bit interested even? You know? That's something I would push you towards. So here's what we'll do. I told you that during Ramadan it's going to be a little bit different, yes? So a couple of things different about Ramadan for Tanzeel. Number one, it's going to be weekly. It's going to be every week during the month of Ramadan. Instead of Saturday, it'll be Sunday, and it's going to be Sunday at 1:30. So I believe that's going to be March 2nd is the first day. Is that right?
First.
March 2nd is the first Sunday of Ramadan, right?
Yes.
Okay, so March 2nd will be the first Tanzeel of Ramadan. Now, last year what we did was we followed Surah Al-Fatiha in detail for those 4 weeks. This year, it was just selfish of me. I really want to do Surah Al-Duha. So the theme of it is going to be like, you can say like emotional healing in the Quran. That's kind of what the main essence of that surah is. We're going to go in it in a good amount of detail, but in a way that I'm sure like I promise you'll be able to follow along, inshallah. If you can go to at least one of them, I recommend it. One thing I really am going to push you guys for, because I purposefully chose like a surah that's like this big. It's very, very short. I highly recommend, guys, and I really mean this, especially for Ramadan, because I'm going to push you harder because it's Ramadan, it's month of Quran. I highly recommend, don't just learn about it when we come here, but like etch it into your heart so that when you're in Salah, you can use it. Like you can recite a surah that you know, and you know what it means, in like a lot of good detail, you know? I'm really excited for that, inshallah. If you're not part of the WhatsApp group, please, if on this side, like come up to me and I'll put you in so that you can see the updates. And then Dunya, raise your hand please. And then Dunya can also put you in on the WhatsApp group as well. Let's close. Any other announcements? Am I good?
Instagram. Follow us on Instagram.
Follow us on Instagram. That's the one I always forget. So just do that as well. All right, let's close this with Al-Asr, and then we'll close off the last Tanzeel before Ramadan. A'udhu billahi min shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Everyone together. Wal-Asr. Innal insana lafi khusr. إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر آمين رب العالمين. Allah says, I swear by time that's running out, every individual human being is drowning in loss except for those who believe and do good deeds and invite others to the truth and invite others with patience. May Allah reward you guys. What's the first date Tanzeel is coming back on Sunday at 1:30? March 2nd, every week, inshallah. May Allah reward you guys. I'll see you guys then. Salam.